I'm sure you're all sick and tired of hearing about the metaverse. So before you click away, I want to take this moment to ask you one question. And if you know the answer, then you already know the story I'll be telling in this video. In which case, I'd recommend skipping this video and continuing on with your day. Please don't actually. Your watch hours keep me alive. The question is simple. How did the metaverse begin? Well, to answer that, we're going to have to take it back to the 90s. The 90s was a wild time. The hair, the clothes, the movies, and this strange new thing that I'm sure you've never heard of. The internet. This internet was very different from the one you are currently using to watch your favorite creator, whose videos you love to share with your friends. So I want you to imagine a time when the internet was still in its infancy, when the phone line was the connection and you had to call your ISP to go online. A time before YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and your mom's OnlyFans. Back when the internet was a technological Wild West, and when you dialed up, there was no telling what you were going to find. If you're like me, then you probably assumed that this whole metaverse concept was drummed up at Lizard headquarters, when in fact, its roots are as roughly as old as the current internet. Pause. I know this is nitpicking, but in the background, there's this piece of art that looks remarkably similar to someone being neck roped. Someone's got to tell my boy Zuck that he can't be having this hanging up in the background for his intro. All right, back to the video. So old that it predates even the term metaverse. Before we get into all that though, we must first go way back to the beginning. So without further ado, let's dive into the fascinating history of World's Chat, the original metaverse.
Welcome to Worlds Online, the internet's first 3D virtual world platform in continuous service since 1994.
Much like today's metaverse, Worlds Chat sought to combine the product and the consumer into one massive universe, where people could chat with one another, watch movies, play games, listen to music, purchase real-life and online products, and build their own worlds. This level of interconnectivity is an ambitious project, even for a techopoly like Facebook, with access to today's bleeding-edge technology and effectively limitless resources. So imagine a small startup company trying to do it with a few investors and early 90s tech. Yet, try they did, and in April of 1994, Worlds Chat had its alpha release. The game was the shiz, and pretty quickly began receiving mainstream attention from 90s pop culture icons like Run DMC and David Bowie. When Worlds Inc. hit the scene and dropped their state-of-the-art gem of a game, it was so revolutionary and, unlike most things in the period, seemingly had the tech to back it up, which meant that not only was it quickly gaining a massive player base, it was also beginning to attract attention from up-and-coming players in the tech industry, most notably the new kid on the block, Amazon.
To the new breed of cyber millionaires.
It's just that you are shaping a completely new universe. That is probably one of the biggest socioeconomic changes that's ever hit the planet.
For context, Worlds Inc. was formed in the middle of the tech bubble, a time when companies were gaining evaluations in the hundreds of millions with a low-quality product, and sometimes without ever having even released a product, or even a real plan for product rollout. So Worlds Inc. was ahead of the game by having a working product and sought to capitalize on the time by listing on the stock exchange in late 1998, with a price per share at $2.78, which, after consulting the great financial oracle, equates to a roughly $55 million evaluation, or roughly $100 million today. A number which would quickly grow to a staggering $366 million by 1999, which is the equivalent of $642 million in 2022. With its massive evaluation came confidence in the position the game and company were headed, and as the 90s began to fade and the 2000s were on the horizon, CEO Thomas Kidron was riding high atop his 10-figure evaluation with growing hopes for the future of his company.
I'm not normally described as perverse. But you've got to be perverse to say the market's going to crash. It may correct, it may have a major correction, but with low inflation, low unemployment, low interest rates, strong corporate earnings, I would be a certifiable lunatic if I said the market was going to crash.
So yeah. That didn't age well. With the advent of the internet, there came companies promising to revolutionize the way people went about their lives, from how you worked to how you played and everything in between. For the most part, these companies were essentially pumping those. However, for years, these dot-com companies got away with it, profiting massively as average people would pour their life savings into them. Until one day in the year 2000, it all came to a screeching halt. And suddenly, these companies, which had originally been valued in the hundreds of millions, if not billions, were worthless. Worlds Inc. was one such company, and in the span of 2 years, fell from its peak at $22.71 per share to a horrifying 48 cents per share. In other words, it lost 97.87% of its value, or a typical day in crypto. With the popping of the dot-com bubble and the loss of investor confidence, the end was nigh for Worlds Inc. From the ashes of the dot-com bubble came the rise of many new game companies that offered better, more realistic worlds for players to interact in.
Second Life is not a game. It is a multi-user virtual environment. It doesn't have points or scores. It doesn't have winners or losers.
Oh, it has losers.
Which, alongside the limitations of early virtual and augmented reality tech, put the final nail in the World's Chat coffin, and with it, the hopes that Thomas Kidron once had for his metaverse. By 2005, worlds in the metaverse it promised had been almost entirely forgotten, existing only vaguely in the memories of those who had once dedicated countless hours to their own corner of the virtual universe. Many of the worlds are still accessible via download links, which once opened act as a bridge into the forgotten age of the internet. Today, what remains of this once cutting-edge platform is a fascinating museum of 90s and early 2000s pop culture, filled with the hopes and dreams of countless people who have long since forgotten the worlds they left behind. Since the time I began writing this video, and now, when I'm finishing the script, Worlds Inc. has rebranded for the 21st century. Well, kind of. Deciding to hop on the metaverse bandwagon, implementing crypto and NFT integrations, adopting the title of the foundational metaverse VR company. Sadly, this update is not out of love for the game, and instead is a last-ditch effort to make some extra money. However, instead of focusing on the negative, on this channel, we focus on the positive. So let's talk about the good Worlds has done for the world. The game is a vision so far ahead of its time. I briefly mentioned it, but to even think the idea of a completely interconnected universe of users where you could purchase things online, interact, talk, essentially live in another reality in the 90s is unthinkable. And yet they did it. And by doing it, by trying, it gave a hope for a brighter, more interconnected future. Worlds is a piece of history showing what it was like to live then. Everything, even down to the colors chosen, is a piece of history. One thing Worlds does a great job of is capturing the strange and bizarre aspects of the 90s and early 2000s. Worlds shows that the potential for humanity is limitless when we work together. Like when you all share this video with everyone you know. For as long as it remains online, Worlds will serve as a relic of a strange time we're all somewhat drawn to. It would be a shame to lose the history this game holds. However, I also think it would be best to let it be laid to rest in the endless expanse of the internet. Thank you so much for watching. Making this video has been like time traveling, and I hope you all enjoyed watching it as much as I did making it. I also need to thank you all for the support I've received on my last video. I have been blown away, and I couldn't be more grateful for you all. With that said, remember to keep smiling, and I'll see you all in the next one.